The title of my topic, the title of my speech is What Do Students Need? We tend in education to talk about schools and we talk about classrooms, and those are all good things, but we can't lose sight that our real goal is focusing on what students need. And my belief right now is we do not look far enough in the future and deep enough to really pay attention to what students need. So I'm going to show you a quick history of what we have done in education, characterize what we're doing now, and then share with you some infrastructure concepts that support it. So here are 4 illustrations. I'm not sure this needs very much explanation. Do you see anything different in the one in the lower right compared to the other 3? Well, I think the answer is it's in color. But otherwise, it's pretty much the same. This is in our DNA. We are working very, very hard to get away from this, but it is in our DNA. It is what our heritage is. Let me see if this clicker actually works. Hey, it works. There we go. So, 100 years ago, the one in the upper right, this is what we were preparing our students for. This is a photo of the car assembly line. And our educators who invented our system looked admiringly at the car assembly line, and they said, well, if Henry Ford can make a car by having one person put on the headlight and one person put on the fender and another person put on the wheel, we can make an education by having one person do the math and one person teach the science and one person teach the Spanish, and when the student rolls out at the end, they will somehow have put it all together. Well, that may have been good enough now, or then, but look at now. Next slide. Are you doing this or am I doing this? Okay, so here's where we are now. That assembly line looks like this. If you look very carefully, you will not see any people, but they are there somewhere in another room. And our classroom environments look like the photo in the lower right corner. I wonder whether that supports that kind of work. And there are other kinds of work as well. Anybody guess where this is? It's one of the many Google offices around the world, and yet our schools look like the photo in the lower right-hand corner. So school in the 20th century had these characteristics, and they're here by the number so you can quickly see them distinctively. And I'm not going to read them all. But it was about teaching alone. It was about learning subjects separately. Even if the same teacher taught them, they taught them separately. They worked alone, and there was always one single answer. And they were teaching compliance, whether they admitted it or not. They were teaching people to take a part and fit into society and work. Learning was passive. It wasn't very well connected to the outside world, and we only had one model of education, and that was why we built so many school buildings that looked all alike with the same kind of furniture, etc. The consequences of that model, and this is research that's just a couple of years old, but the consequences of that model in today's terms is this chart, this graph, that shows engagement of students in their learning in the USA. And the easiest way to understand this is that students in the 5th grade have been measured at about 75% engaged, and their engagement drops steadily every year until the 11th grade when they are only 32% engaged. This to me is shocking and very sad, but not surprising. Because as the world has changed, our systems have not changed, and our teachers are teaching the way they were taught. We know a lot now that informs education. We know that students need to learn the 4 C's, the portable skills for success. The lack of engagement, to me, clearly means that we are not focusing on what our students need. We are focusing on how we were taught to teach. So our students need creativity, innovation, critical thinking. They need to learn communication skills, and they need to learn collaboration. These are portable. They will last the rest of their lives. Research also shows that students need to develop their emotional intelligence in order to be successful. And our schools have, for decades now, concentrated on their intelligence quotient, their IQ, their cognitive knowledge. We have been paying attention to the wrong things. Tony Wagner at Harvard University has a great quote. He says, "The learning experience is more important than the curriculum content." What a student experiences in school, the entire experience, the environment, the attitude, the feeling of it, is more important than any cognitive knowledge they get from the required curriculum. And so what's emerging now is a different kind of school. And you can see that this list of 21st century learning skills, portable skills, etc., is longer than the one we had for 20th century. We want much more for our students than we have ever wanted before. And in this case, I'm not going to read them all. I'll just highlight a couple of them, but I will point out, you can tell that I snuck one more in this morning because there are 2 number 8s. So there's really 14. So we need to teach the 4 C's while we are teaching the core curriculum. We do not have time to have a course called the 4 C's, and besides, that's not the way you learn them. We need interdisciplinary learning. Why is it the world outside of school is incredibly interdisciplinary and school is not? We need project-based learning where students are doing active learning, engaged learning, and where they can come up with many possible different answers. There's no longer any single answer. We need to move away from one model of education and recognize that we have multiple models and they may all be happening at the same time in the same school and maybe even in the same classroom. We need to connect to this community, and we need to make a way for our teachers to collaborate with each other and co-teach. And lastly, we have to keep those kids moving or their brains are going to go to sleep. Now, in the USA, the government tells us what to teach, but not how to teach. And so, while they tell us what the core curriculum is, individual schools can decide how they're going to deliver it and what the activities of the students are going to be. And that is the only thing in the USA that is opening the door for innovation, and we need it desperately. Let me show you some examples that explain this graphically. So this is a project that we did about 10 years ago. If you notice, it had, in the black, it had classrooms and a corridor. Very similar plan to what you have in your schools, except that you would split them and have 2 corridors and split the classroom. So what we did have is this traditional classroom concept, and it was one wing of the building. And we were working with teachers who wanted to work together. And so we made a space of collaboration. We took the corridor and we widened it out, and we made it so that it could hold furniture and be a place for learning. Students are learning in small groups, and they move from space to space to space during the course of the day. And the teachers, the 4 core teachers here, share all 100 students. It's not Mr. Jones's room and Miss Smith's room. It's all of our rooms and all of our students. And so consequently, those teachers share their knowledge about the students, and that allows the students to learn better. So what we found out about this, within 3 months of opening, is that the teachers reported that the students who had behavior problems had much better behavior. The kids who were wiggly and couldn't pay attention in the box classroom, they did pretty well in this suite of spaces. This is a grouping of spaces shared by several teachers. And then we had the parents come and visit it, and they said, this is really great. Why didn't you do this before? This was a spatial concept that they had never heard of before. They did not know what one of these was. But we got the applause from the parents. And then when the statewide testing was done a year later, the test scores went up. So I think on those three measures, we scored highly. Here is a photo of what it looks looking down the row of classrooms, and in the upper left you will see a barn door between the rooms, because we are fostering movement of students from space to space, and we're fostering teachers working together. Let me jump to Bogota, Colombia, where I worked with the Capital District Schools and the Colombian Society of Architects to reinvent the school building model. And so these are 4 photographs from the entrance in a design competition we held. And if you look closely at them, you will see that, yes, they do have classrooms, but they have open, extended learning areas. The 2 top slides show that for the secondary school. The lower slide shows it for the primary school. This is a new model. It'll take several more years to get it built, and the real task then will be training the teachers to use this and roll out a delivery of 21st century learning. Here's one of the other competitors, and I underscore this. On the left-hand side is his diagram of active circulation, using the circulation for learning, and on the right-hand side is flexibility for change. Because what we know is this: if a school is going to innovate in the year 2018, they're going to want to continue innovating over and over and over again. So our job is not to define the perfect school right now, but our job is to empower them to refine their model, to invent new things, and to make change. One example that is much more modest but highly effective, this is Gimnasio Las Querbas, also in Bogota, and I started with them 5 years ago, and we did visioning and training of teachers, and this is what their classroom arrangement was like. Looks familiar, right? Rows of classrooms all separated from each other. Students sitting in rows in the classrooms. And we started project-based learning, and we remodeled, grouping by grouping, the classrooms, and here's what we have now. So classrooms that are open to the walkway system, so that students can be learning in the walkway, expanding the square meters of the classroom. Classrooms that are connected to each other with folding doors, and classrooms where every square meter of wall surface is either a marker board or a bulletin board. This fosters project-based learning, student-centered learning. Now, here's the educational outcome. This is a private school. Parents select to have their students come here. Guess what? We started project-based learning. We remodeled a few classrooms, and enrollments went up. Students went home and they told their parents what their experience was. They were excited about school. They were doing projects, they were doing real work. Parents talked to other parents, and those parents enrolled their students in the school. That, to me, is a good measure of success. Here's what the photograph of the classroom looks like in the lower left. And then the corridor system in the lower right. They are slowly going through their entire school building, changing the classrooms to this 21st century model. Now, how do you get there? I want to share some steps in a process, because I don't believe the process works by having a group of people who are researchers administrative authorities telling people what to do, telling teachers what to do. I believe that a vision needs to be developed with key stakeholders. Teachers, school administrators, students. We need to be asking our 10th graders what learning should be like. And by asking the participants, the key stakeholders in our individual school buildings, it's the only way we can bring change. Because if we force change on them, it's not going to happen, and it's not going to happen from the heart. So here's some photographs of a school in Michigan where people are in active participation to create the new model of school. Here's one in California. And I don't know whether anybody is familiar with the American system of advanced placement, higher level learning. This very rigorous school, in the visioning, conceived the idea that they were going to eliminate that. And in fact, they have done that in the last couple of years. Then we need to do professional development with staff. Here's a photograph in Connecticut on the left and in Morocco on the right. Different topics, project-based learning, international baccalaureate, looping. If we do not train our teachers, they will not do 21st century teaching. And then we need to talk to the parents. Because most parents know about school from when they went to school. And if we don't meet with them, share with them, get them engaged in group discussions about 21st century learning, they will be resistant. And then we will not get anywhere. I believe that the part of making the building and buying the furniture is the easy part. The part of working with the community, the part of professional development for teachers, the part of creating the vision of what schools should be, the part of creating the delivery concepts while still teaching the required core curriculum that the ministry tells us, that's the hard part. That's where we need to focus our attention. So what do students need? That's for you to decide. If you'd like to contact me, I'd be glad to talk with you about it. So thank you.